Hello friends and welcome back. In this section, we will discuss iteration and jump statements. Iteration statements let us repeat actions. So we also call them loops or looping statements. To understand the role and utility of loops in programming, I will walk you through a hypothetical scenario. Let's say I am throwing a party at my house and 10 of my friends will be joining me. I want to instruct my computer through a Java program to bake 10 pizzas for my friends. What are the steps involved in making a pizza? We start by preparing the dough for the pizza. After that, we add pizza sauce, cheese and toppings of our choice to the pizza. Then we bake the pizza in oven for 15 minutes and our yummy pizza is ready. Our pretend pizza baking program will simply print a line for each of the steps of the pizza baking process. We first print preparing the dough to the console. After that, we add pizza sauce followed by cheese and toppings of our choice. I want to make a veg, onion, capsicum and olives pizza. Then we put our pizza in oven for baking. Baking takes some time and I want to simulate it by putting some delay in the program's execution. Thread.sleep is the method to use in such situations. Thread.sleep pauses the execution of the program for a specified amount of time. The time is provided in milliseconds as an argument to the method. This line thread.sleep 1000 will introduce a delay of 1 second in program's execution. After that, we print pizza is ready to the console. Let me execute the program and show you the effect of thread.sleep. Once I execute the program, notice that the line pizza is ready will get printed after some delay. I will bring up the console window. I am executing prepare pizzas method now. Did you notice the delay? You may have missed it. 1 second is too short a time. Let me increase it to 10 seconds, then you will surely notice it. Now pizza is ready will get printed after a delay of 10 seconds. I am executing prepare pizzas method now. All the lines before thread.sleep gets printed. Pizza is ready is not printed yet. Let's wait for it. Now pizza is ready gets printed. Just to make sure you understand what thread.sleep does, I will comment out this line and execute the program again. This time all the lines are executed immediately. Let me uncomment it and change the delay back to 1 second. You would have also noticed this throws interrupted exception in the definition of prepare pizzas method. This is related to exceptions. As exceptions are not part of ICSE computer applications syllabus, you can safely ignore this part. I will still briefly explain it for those of you who are interested. Thread.sleep method throws interrupted exception. We are not handling it in prepare pizzas method. In Java, except error and runtime exceptions, all exceptions are checked exceptions. So, the compiler requires us to mention in the definition of prepare pizzas method that it may throw interrupted exception. Don't worry if this explanation about exceptions didn't make any sense to you at all. Exceptions is a relatively advanced concept and we haven't discussed it. So it is perfectly fine if you are not able to follow the explanation. As I said before, you can safely ignore it. Okay, coming back to our pretend pizza baking program, right now it is baking only one pizza. But we need 10 pizzas. What should we do to make our program bake 10 pizzas? Very simple. I will copy these lines and repeat it 9 more times. This will give me 10 pizzas. Let me do it and execute the program. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I will execute the program now. Okay, my pizzas have started baking. It's still baking. And now my pizzas are ready. But wait, my friends just called me and said they want non-veg pizzas. But my program is baking veg pizzas. Let's change the program to add chicken to the pizzas. Now I need to make this change at 9 more places. So I'll copy this line and add it to the other 9 pizzas as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That was too much work. Just after making this change, I came to know that one more friend is coming, so I need 11 pizzas now. I'm going to repeat these lines one more time to bake 11 pizzas. Do you see now how much difficult it is to maintain this program? Even to make simple changes, so much effort is required. There must be a better, more efficient way to do this. Turns out there is. We have a set of statements that are repeating in this program. Whenever an action repeats, we must use loops. We briefly looked at loops in our second Java program chapter. Let's try using it here. This is the code to bake a single veg onion capsicum olives pizza that we started with initially. I will put it in a for loop to execute it 10 times. Let me run the program now. Our 10 veg pizzas are ready. If I want to bake non-veg pizzas, it is just a single line of change, like this. Instead of baking 10 pizzas always, I can change the program to ask me how many pizzas I need and bake that many pizzas. I will use the scanner class to take the number of pizzas to bake as input from the user. I will run the loop that many times. I will run the program now. I need 11 pizzas and my pizzas have started baking. And my 11 pizzas are ready. Now I can enjoy the party with my friends. I hope this gives you a good idea of the importance of loops in programming and how they simplify the life of a programmer. Java provides 3 looping statements: for, while and do while. These 3 loops are grouped into 2 categories: entry controlled loops and exit controlled loops. An entry controlled loop checks the condition at the time of entry. Only if the condition is true, the program control enters the body of the loop. For and while are entry controlled loops. An exit controlled loop checks the condition after executing its body. If the condition is true, loop will perform the next iteration, otherwise program control will move out of the loop. The do while loop is an exit controlled loop. The main difference between entry and exit controlled loops is that in case of entry controlled loops, if the condition is false, the body of the loop is not executed at all, not even once. In case of exit controlled loop, since the condition is checked at the end of its body, so even if the condition is false, the body of the loop will get executed once. Don't worry if this concept of entry and exit controlled loops is still not very clear to you. Once we have completed our discussion of for, while and do while, you will easily understand this entry and exit control concept. In this lesson, we will look at while loop. It is Java's most fundamental looping construct. It repeats a single statement or a code block while its condition evaluates to true. It has this syntax. This first syntax repeats a single statement. If you want to repeat more than one statement, use this code block syntax. Remember, in the code blocks and tokens lecture, I told you that code blocks can be used at any place where a single statement can. We used code blocks a lot in if and switch statements we discussed in the previous section. We will use it in loops too. With all the three loops, for, while and do while, you will see that we can use code blocks to repeat more than one statement. Okay, coming back to the syntax of while loop. This condition can be any Boolean expression. We call this the body of the loop. The body of the loop will be repeatedly executed as long as the condition is true. Once the condition becomes false, program control will move to the statement immediately after the loop. Let's look at a very simple program to understand the working of while loop. Here, we have declared an int variable I and initialized it to 0. Then we have a while loop. These two statements form the body of our while loop as they are enclosed within this pair of curly braces. One execution of loop body is called an iteration. Let me execute hello while method and get the output of this program. I will bring back the code and then we will walk through the hello while method and try to understand how the while loop generated this output. This first statement of hello while method declares I as an int variable and assigns it a value of 0. After that, program control reaches our while loop. First, the condition of while loop is tested. As I is 0, condition evaluates to true. Program control enters the loop body and executes this println statement, giving us our first output line. Program control moves to the next statement and executes it. This increments value of I to 1. As this is the last statement of loop body, first iteration of while loop completes after executing it. Program control goes back to the beginning of while loop to start the second iteration. Again, the condition of while loop is tested. I is now 1, but it is still less than 3, so condition evaluates to true. Program control enters the loop body, prints this second line of output on the console, and increments I to 2. Second iteration of while loop completes. Program control goes back to the beginning of while loop and tests the condition to see if it can start the third iteration. I is 2, so condition evaluates to true. Again, loop body is executed. Third line of the output showing value of I as 2 is printed to the console. Value of I becomes 3 now and third iteration completes. Program control goes to the beginning of the while loop and tests the condition to see if it can start the fourth iteration. The condition evaluates to false as the value of I is now 3. So fourth iteration is not started and program control moves to this println statement immediately after the while loop. We see the output now you know while loop printed on the console. And with this, execution of the program completes. I hope with this explanation you are now comfortable with the working of while loop. Okay, moving on. In the Introduction to Loops lesson, I talked about entry and exit control loops and said that while loop is an entry control loop. Let's take a closer look at it and try to understand why while loop is an entry control loop. We saw that while loop tests its condition at the beginning of the loop before entering the loop's body. If the condition is false before the first iteration itself, then the body of the loop will not execute even once. I will change this line and initialize I with a value of 4 like this. The while loop should not execute now. Let's confirm this by running the program. As you saw, while loop didn't execute. After initializing I with a value of 4, when program control comes to the while loop for the first time and tests the condition, it evaluates to false. Program control doesn't enter inside the loop's body and goes to the statement after the loop printing "Now you know while loop" to the console. As the condition of while loop controls entry to loop's body, we categorize it as an entry controlled loop. In the conditional statements section, we learned how to extract the digits of a number. There, we only extracted 3 digits of the number. In this lesson, we will build upon that example and learn how we can extract all the digits of any number of arbitrary lengths. I will suggest you review extracting digits of a number first if you haven't already watched it. To recap, when you divide a number by 10 and take the remainder, you get the digit in the units place. Next, you truncate the number by doing integer division of the number with 10. You repeat these 2 steps till the number becomes 0 to extract all digits of the number. Whenever some action requires repetition in your program, it should ring a bell in your mind that you need to use loops. Let's switch to BlueJ and try writing the program to compute the sum of digits of a number. We will complete compute digit sum method to take the number as input from the user, extract its digits, add them and display the sum to the user. Let me quickly add the code to accept the number from the user. I will speed up the video for this part. Now our compute digit sum method is asking the user to enter the number. Next, we will add code to extract the digits and add them. I am declaring this sum variable which will accumulate the sum of the digits. I will initialize it to 0. To get the digit in units place, I need to divide the number with 10 and take the remainder. This is the job for modulus operator. In the second step, I will do integer division of the number with 10 like this. To repeat these 2 steps, I will put them in a while loop. I need to repeat these steps till number becomes 0, so I will give the condition as num greater than 0. Our loop will continue executing till number is greater than 0. When number becomes 0, the condition will evaluate to false and the loop will stop executing. Just to make sure that our logic so far is correct, I will temporarily introduce a println statement to print the extracted digits like this. Let's run the program and check our logic so far. No syntax errors, that's a good start. I am giving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 as the first input. All digits are extracted correctly. Let me test one more input, 2020. Okay, our logic works correctly. Let's go back to the code. To compute the sum, we just need to add the digit to our accumulator variable sum like this. I will complete the program by printing the sum outside the while loop. Our program is ready. Let's test it out. Our logic works correctly and we can happily conclude this lesson. In this lesson, we will look at palindrome number program. A number is said to be a palindrome number if it remains the same when its digits are reversed. 747, 121, 48984, 34543 are some examples of palindrome numbers. This is our palindrome number program. In this part of the program, we accept the number from the user with the help of a scanner class and make a copy of it to preserve the original input. This much of the while loop should look familiar to you from the last lesson. It is extracting each digit of the number into the digit variable. This line is reversing the number digit by digit. To understand how this line is reversing the number, I am adding statements to print the value of digit and revnum at each iteration of the while loop. I will run the program now, giving it a non-palindromic number 123 as the input. Let me bring back the code. In the first iteration, the digit in the units place, which is 3, is extracted. Current value of revnum is 0. So this line multiplies 0 with 10 and adds digit to it, effectively storing digit in revnum. Revnum now becomes 3, which is shown in the output here. In the second iteration, the digit 2 is extracted. Revnum is 3, multiplying it with 10 and adding 2 to it gives us 32, as shown in the output here. Notice that by the end of second iteration, we have reversed 2 digits of the number. In the third iteration, the digit 1 is extracted. Current value of revnum is 32 and this line changes it to 321 as shown in the output here. At this point, we have successfully reversed the number. After third iteration, number becomes 0. So the while loop completes. Program control moves to this if-else after the loop. We check the reversed number with the original number. If both are equal, then number is a palindrome, otherwise it is not. Let me run the program with the palindrome number as input. I will give the number as 34543. It correctly identifies it as a palindromic number. I will remove all these extra statements I added for understanding the logic. Now our palindrome number program is ready. In this lesson, we will look at Armstrong number program. A positive number is an Armstrong number if it is equal to the sum of cubes of its digits. 1, 153, 370, 371, 407 are a few examples of Armstrong numbers. Taking 153 as an example, it is an Armstrong number as it is equal to the sum of cubes of its digits. This is our Armstrong number program. We first accept the number as input from the user through a scanner class and make a copy of it. Next, we declare an int variable CubeSum and initialize it to 0. We will use CubeSum as an accumulator to store the sum of cubes of digits. After that, we have the while loop which will run till the number is greater than 0. Inside the loop, we extract the digit, compute its cube and add it to CubeSum. Then we truncate the number. After the loop, we check if sum of cubes of digits is equal to the number and print an appropriate message accordingly. I will add a few print statements to get some insights into what is happening in each iteration of the loop. And then we will run the program and correlate the output with the code. In the first iteration, the digit in the units place, which is 3, is extracted. CubeSum is 0. Adding cube of 3 to it changes its value to 27. The number is truncated and first iteration of while loop completes. Program control goes back to the beginning of while loop and tests the condition. As number is greater than 0, second iteration of while loop starts. Digit 5 is extracted from the number. Cube of 5 is 125. This gets added to CubeSum, making it 152. The number is truncated to 1 and second iteration of while loop completes. As number is greater than 0, third iteration of while loop begins. Digit 1 is extracted. Its cube is 1, so CubeSum becomes 153. The number is truncated to 0 and third iteration of while loop completes. Again, program control goes back to the beginning of while loop, but now condition becomes false as number is 0. Program control comes to this if check after the while loop. It compares the number with the sum of cubes of its digits. For 153, both are equal. So, 153 is an Armstrong number gets printed to the console. I am removing these extra print statements that I added for explaining the working of the program. Let me test the program with a non-Armstrong number too. I will give 436 as the input this time. So, our program correctly identifies if a number is Armstrong or not. In this lesson, we will look at SPI number program. A number is said to be a SPI number if sum of its digits is equal to the product of its digits. Taking the example of 1124, sum of its digits is 8. Product of its digits is also 8. So 1124 is a SPI number. Here is our SPI number program. We first accept the number as input from the user through scanner class and make a copy of it. Next, we declare three int variables, digit, sum and product. Digit will hold the extracted digit of the number. Sum and product are used as accumulators to store the sum and product of digits respectively. After that, we have the while loop which will run till the number is greater than 0. Inside the loop, we extract the digit, add it to sum, compute product with it, and lastly, we truncate the number. After the loop, we check if sum of digits is equal to their product and print an appropriate message accordingly. Let me add a few print statements to get some insights into what is happening in each iteration of the loop. And then we will run the program and correlate the output with the code. I will give 1, 2, 3 as input. It is a SPI number. Before the execution of while loop, value of sum and product is 0 and 1 respectively. In the first iteration, the digit in the units place, which is 3, is extracted. Sum is 0. Adding digit to sum changes the value of sum to 3. Product is 1. Multiplying it with digit makes product also as 3. The number is truncated and first iteration of while loop completes. Program control goes back to the beginning of while loop and tests the condition. As number is greater than 0, second iteration of while loop starts. Digit 2 is extracted from the number, sum becomes 5, product becomes 6, the number is truncated to 1 and second iteration of while loop completes. Again, program control goes back to the beginning of while loop. Condition is still true as number is greater than 0. Last digit of number is extracted, sum becomes 6, product remains 6, the number is truncated to 0 and third iteration of while loop completes. Again, program control goes back to the beginning of while loop. But now the condition becomes false as number is 0. Program control comes to this if check after the while loop. As sum and product are both 6, this condition tests true. 1, 2, 3 is a SPI number, gets printed to the console. Let me remove these extra print statements I added. This is our final SPI number program. We saw in the while loop lesson that if the condition of while loop is false before the start of first iteration itself, then the body of the loop will not be executed at all. However, There are situations where we want to execute the body of the loop at least once, even if the condition is false before the first iteration itself. Java's do-while loop helps us to do exactly this. Here is its syntax. Use this syntax if you want to repeat a single statement, and this one if you want to repeat more than one statement. As you can see in its syntax, the do-while loop first executes the body of the loop and then evaluates the condition. So, the body of the loop is executed at least once even if the condition is false before the first iteration itself. As do-while loop tests its condition at the end of its body, it is categorized as exit controlled loop. The most common scenario for executing the body of the loop at least once without worrying about the condition is when you need to show a menu to your users to choose from. Let's look at a BlueJ program to understand how do-while loop works. Let me start the execution of the program to tell you what it does. This program tells us the capitals of countries. It presents a simple menu providing us an option of 5 countries: Azerbaijan, Canada, India, Kyrgyzstan, and Switzerland to choose from. Notice it is giving us a 6th option: to exit, enter -1. What's that for? So far, all the programs we have written used to take the input data from us, perform their task, and exit. But this program is different. It will keep on presenting this menu to us until we enter -1. -1 will tell the program that we want to stop it now. Let me show it to you. I want to know the capital of Canada, so I am entering 2. My program tells me that capital of Canada is Ottawa, and it again presents the menu to me to choose a country or to exit the program. This time, I want to know the capital of Azerbaijan, so I will enter 1. It tells me Azerbaijan's capital as Baku and again presents the menu to me. It will keep on doing this until I enter -1 like this. This behavior is made possible by do-while loop. Let's look at the code of this program now. These println statements display the menu. Then we accept the user's choice with the help of scanner class. After that, we have the switch statement which helps in displaying the capital of the country user asked for. All these statements are contained within a do-while loop. We need to show the menu to the user at least once, otherwise how will the user come to know of his choices? That's why we use a do-while loop here. Let me change the font size to what it was. The condition of this do-while loop is ch not equal to -1 as we want to exit the loop when user enters -1. For all other inputs from the user, we want to continue presenting the menu to him. Let's do a dry run of the program with input as 2. I will start the program again. After creating an object of scanner class and declaring int variable ch, the program control comes to the do-while loop. It enters the loop body without checking the condition, as condition check will be performed at the end of the loop. These statements display the menu, and then the program control waits for user input. I am giving 2 as the input. It gets assigned to ch. Program control reaches the switch statement. Case 2 gets matched as ch is 2 and this println statement gets executed, printing capital of Canada is Ottawa on the console. The break statement sends the program control outside of switch statement to this println statement. An empty line gets printed to the console. Program control reaches the end of do-while loop body and now the condition check is performed for the first time. Ch is 2, so it is not equal to -1 and the condition evaluates to true. Program control goes back to the beginning of do-while loop and starts the next iteration. The menu is printed again to the console and program waits for user input. This time I will enter -1. Program control now comes to the switch statement. Case -1 is matched. This println statement prints by to the console. The break statement causes the program control to move to the println statement just after switch statement and print an empty line to the console. Program control comes to the end of the do-while loop and checks the condition. As ch is -1, the condition becomes false and program control moves out of the do-while loop. As there is no statement after the do-while loop, execution of the program completes. I hope this gives you a good idea of how do-while loop works and when to use it. Next, we will look at the for loop. We looked at a basic form of for loop in our second Java program chapter earlier in this course. In this lesson, we will dive deep into it and try to understand all of its features. For loop is an entry control loop. It has the following syntax. As we saw with the other loops, use this syntax if you want to repeat a single statement, and this one if you want to repeat more than one statement. Unlike while and do-while loops, the for loop groups its initialization condition and update parts and mentions it at the start of the loop. Let's see how each of these parts work in case of for loops. Statements in the initialization part are executed only once when the program control reaches the for statement for the first time. Initialization part is executed before the program control enters the loop body. It is not executed in subsequent iterations of for loop. The condition part is tested on each iteration of the loop. Condition can be any Boolean expression. If condition tests true, loop body is executed. Once the condition tests false, iteration of the loop stops and program control moves to the statement immediately after the for loop. Statements in the increment-decrement part of for loop are executed at the end of each iteration. Let's switch to BlueJ and see these concepts in practice. This program prints the tables of 2 and 13 till 12. Let me execute the program and get the output. The execution of demo for loop method begins from this statement. Since this is the first time that the program control has reached the beginning of this for loop, the initialization part of the loop is executed. It declares an int variable I and assigns it a value of 1. Next, the condition of the loop is checked. I is less than 12, so the condition tests true and first iteration of the for loop begins. Program control enters the loop body and executes this statement, assigning A the value of 2. It moves to the next statement and assigns B the value of 13. Next, this println statement is executed and we get our first output line on the console. Program control reaches the end of the loop body, so it again goes back to the beginning of for loop and executes the increment-decrement part. The value of I gets incremented to 2, and with this, the first iteration of for loop completes. Program control then tests the condition to see if it can start the second iteration. Condition tests true and second iteration of for loop begins. Note that initialization part of the loop is not executed now, as it is executed only once when the program control encounters the for loop for the first time. Similar to the first iteration, A gets assigned the value of 4, B gets assigned the value of 26, and the second output line is printed to the console. Program control goes back to the beginning of the loop, executes the increment-decrement part, changing the value of I to 3. Iteration of the for loop continues in a similar manner till the 12th iteration. In the 12th iteration, after executing this statement, program control goes back to the beginning of the loop and executes the increment-decrement part, changing the value of I to 13. This completes the 12th iteration. Now, when the program control tests the condition, it becomes false as I is now greater than 12. So, the 13th iteration of the for loop is not started. Program control moves to this statement after the for loop. A new line and then now you know for loop gets printed to the console. As this is the last statement of demo for loop method, execution of the program completes. Now you should have a good understanding of how for loop works. There is another important thing that I want to discuss with you which often causes a lot of confusion. It is regarding the loop control variable. This I is called the loop control variable as it controls the number of iterations of the loop. Notice that we have declared I inside this opening and closing bracket in the initialization part of this for loop. When we declare a variable like this, its scope is limited only to the for loop inside which it is declared. So this I is seen only within the code block of this for loop. Outside the for loop, the variable I does not exist. Let me show it to you in code. I am trying to print i's value outside the for loop, but I am getting a compile time error as I does not exist outside the for loop. Most of the times, the loop control variable is only used within the loop. It is not needed outside. But if you need to use it outside the loop too, then you should declare it outside for like this. Now this println is not giving any error as I is available outside the loop too. The initialization and increment-decrement part of the for loop can contain more than one statement. In the next lesson, we will see such for loops. You can specify more than one statement in the initialization and increment-decrement part of the for loop. This BlueJ program shows a use case where our program can benefit by using multiple statements in initialization and increment-decrement part. Let me execute the program and get the output first. In the program, we declare two int variables a and b. We assign a value of 4 to b. After that, we have a for loop. Notice that the condition of for loop is a less than b, and within the for loop, we are decrementing b. So, this loop is controlled by two variables a and b. Wouldn't it be nice if we can manage b also within the for statement like how we are managing a? We can do this as for loop allows us to specify more than one statement in its initialization and increment-decrement part. Let me show you how. I will remove this line as now I will initialize b in the initialization part of for loop like this. You can specify multiple statements in initialization and increment-decrement part by separating them with comma. I will remove this line and move decrementing b to the increment-decrement part of for loop like this. Now both our loop control variables a and b are managed inside the for loop itself. Let's execute the program. It generates the same output as before. In this lesson, we will look at a few variations of for loop. The initialization, condition, and increment-decrement part of for loop can be used in a variety of ways. This makes for loop a powerful and versatile looping construct. Using for loops, you can do all the things possible with while and do-while loops and much more than that. The first variation that we will see involves the condition part. The conditional expression of the condition part need not test the loop control variable against some target value. It can be any Boolean expression. Let's look at a Java program in BlueJ to understand this. I will start by executing this program. This program repeatedly asks the user to enter a character and prints its ASCII code. To stop the program, user should enter 0. At the end, the program also tells the user the count of characters entered by him. I will give A as the input. As you can see, after printing the ASCII code, it again asks me to enter another character. Let me try out a few inputs. I want to stop the program now, so I am giving 0 as the input. It tells me that I asked for ASCII codes of 5 characters and exits. Let's move to the code now and understand how we achieve this functionality with for loop. Here, in the first line, we declare an int variable I. We will use this to keep a count of the number of characters entered by the user. In the next line, we declare a char variable ch which will store the character entered by the user as input. Coming to the for loop, notice that we have used the variable I in initialization and increment-decrement part, but in the condition, we have used the char variable ch. As I told you earlier, condition of a for loop can be any Boolean expression. It need not test the loop control variable only. In the body of the for loop, we ask the user to input a character, store it in the variable ch and display its ASCII code. We are incrementing I with each iteration of for loop. This helps us to keep a count of the number of characters entered by the user. Let's see how the loop will exit when the user enters 0. Let me run the program again. The program control is waiting at this line for user input. User gives 0 as input. Program control moves to the next line and prints ASCII code of 0. As this is the last statement of the loop body, program control goes back to the beginning of the for loop, increments I and then tests the condition. The condition becomes false as ch is equal to 0 and program control moves to this println statement after the for loop. It prints I as the count of the characters entered by the user and the program completes. I hope this gives you some idea about the versatility of the for loop. The next variation that we will learn is even more interesting. The initialization, condition, and increment-decrement part of the for loop are optional. You can remove any or all of them if you want. For loop will still be syntactically valid. In our display ASCII code program, I can remove this initialization part of for loop and initialize I along with its declaration like this. This is a valid for loop. The code compiles with no errors. We can remove any part, but notice that we still need to write semicolons. Otherwise, we'll start getting errors. Putting back the semicolon. Now the code compiles fine again. Next, I will remove this increment-decrement part and move it inside the for loop like this. The code compiles just fine. Let me run it and show you that everything is working just like before. I will test the extreme by removing the condition part too. Let's see if our for loop is still valid by compiling the code. We got an error. It is not in the for loop but in the line just after for loop. The error says unreachable statement. I will comment out this line and we will come back to this error in a moment, but first I want to show you that this is a valid for loop. Code compiles fine after commenting the line, so this is a valid for loop. You can omit any part of the for loop you want and it will still be syntactically correct as long as you remember to specify the semicolons. Coming back to the error we got for which we commented out this line, let me uncomment it now. This for loop is not the same as the one before where we kept the condition and omitted initialization and increment-decrement parts. Since we have specified no condition, this for loop will continue iterating forever. It will never stop. We call such loops that never stop as infinite loop. So, the program control will never reach this println statement after the for loop. Java's compiler is very smart. It detects this infinite loop and marks this line in error saying that it is unreachable. I am commenting this again to run the program and show you the infinite loop. It is repeatedly asking me to enter a character. Even when I enter 0, it is not exiting as I have removed the condition. To stop this program, we need to restart the JVM. We can restart the JVM by using this button. We will look at infinite loops in depth a little later in this section. Next, we will look at jump statements. We will look at two jump statements in this section, break and continue. I first introduced break in the conditional statements section and showed you how it prevents fall through in switch statements. In this section, we will examine its usage in loops. The break statement causes the program control to jump out of the loop by passing the conditional expression and any remaining code in the body of the loop. Execution of the program resumes from the statement after the for loop. Going through a working example will make the concept of break statement crystal clear, so let's switch to BlueJ now. This is a very simple and straightforward for loop which prints value of I is 1 to value of I is 10 like this. I will introduce a break statement inside the for loop like this. When the value of I becomes 5, this break will get executed. Let me execute the program and get the output. This time, the loop executed 5 times only. As long as the value of I is less than 5, execution of for loop happens normally. When I becomes 5, the condition of this if statement tests true. Program control enters its code block. This println statement prints this output line to the console. Next, the program control comes to our break statement. Break statement transfers the program control outside the for loop to this println statement. End of for loop is printed to the console and execution of the program completes. This is how the break statement works inside the loop. It transfers the program control unconditionally outside the loop. We can use break statement with all of Java's loop, not just for loop. Here is the while version of the program with break statement. Let me execute it. This works the same as the previous program. You can use break within a do-while loop in a similar manner. Here is the do-while version of the program. I will execute it and show you that the output is same as before. Now that you know what break statement does inside a loop, if you compare it with break statement inside switch statement, you will realize that both are similar. In both cases, break statement transfers the program control out of the code block within which it is written. As you saw in the previous example, you will use the break statement to come out of the loop when some condition is met. Most of the times, once you are out of the loop, you will need to determine if the loop completed normally because its condition became false, or you came out of the loop using the break statement. I am sure whatever I am saying is not making much sense to you. So let's look at an example to understand this concretely. I want to write a program to check if the number entered by the user is a prime number or not. To check if the number is prime or not, I will use a very simple method. I will try to divide the number by all the numbers from 2 to half of that number. That is, from 2 to number divided by 2. If the number is not divisible by these numbers, then it is a prime number. Taking 9 as an example, 9 divided by 2 is 4.5. But we are doing integer division, so considering only the integer part, we get 4. Now, I will divide 9 by 2, 3 and 4. 2 4 times gives me 8. The remainder is 1, so 9 is not divisible by 2. Let's try the next number 3. 3 times gives me 9. So 9 is divisible by 3. Hence, 9 is not a prime number. We will stop at 3 itself. No need to check with the next number 4, as we know now that 9 is not prime. Let's check 11 also with this method. 11 divided by 2 gives me 5. I need to check if 11 is divisible by 2, 3, 4 or 5. Let's start with 2. So 11 is not divisible by 2. Let's try with 3. So 11 is not divisible by 3 also. Moving on to 4. Not divisible by 4 also. Let's try the last number 5. Not divisible by 5 too. So our method correctly identifies 11 as a prime number. Now we know how to solve this problem. The next step is to convert this solution into Java code. So let's switch to BlueJ. I have already created this class keyboardPrimeCheck, and inside the class I have declared this PrimeCheck method. If you want to learn how to create a project and a class in BlueJ, I have already covered that in the Introduction to BlueJ chapter in Hello Java in BlueJ section. Please watch that first and then continue with this lesson. The PrimeCheck method is not complete. It is just accepting the number from the user using the scanner class. Together we will complete the PrimeCheck method in this lesson. Our solution involves dividing this num by all the numbers from 2 till num divided by 2. How to do this in Java? In this step, we will divide the number repeatedly. Whenever something repeats, we use loops. As we know that our loop should start at 2, run till num divided by 2 and increment by 1 in each iteration, for loop is the best for this situation. Let me write the for loop then. Inside the loop, we need to check if I divides num, and we know that in Java, we use the modulus operator for this. Now, what to do if I divides num? If I divides num, we know that num is not prime. Our task is done. No need to check if num is divisible by other values of I or not. So, here we'll use the break statement to come out of the loop. What should we write here? Outside the loop, I need to know if I came out of the loop by executing this break statement or the loop completed all iterations and exited normally. If the loop is terminated by break statement, then the number is not prime. If it ended normally, then the number is prime. One way to do this is to check the loop control variable. If break was executed, this condition will still be true. If loop exited normally, then this condition must be false. So, outside the for loop, I will write this if statement. If break was executed, then num is not prime. Else, num is a prime number. I will compile the program to make sure everything is working fine so far. I'm getting an error for variable I. The compiler is not able to find I. Remember what I told you about the scope of loop control variable in the for loop lesson? Since I have declared I inside the for loop, its scope is only this code block. It is not visible outside the body of this for loop. To fix this error, I will declare I outside for loop like this and remove this int from here. So our program is ready. It is compiling. Let's execute it. First, I will try a prime number 7. Let me try a few more inputs. So our program works correctly. This is one way to check if program control exited the loop because of break statement or normally. I want to show you another way to check this. We have gone back to the state of the program before we introduced the if check for I outside for loop. In the previous approach, we used the loop control variable to check if the loop exited by executing break statement. In this approach, we will not use the loop control variable. I will declare a new Boolean variable is prime and initialize it to true. You can think of it as I am starting with an assumption that the number entered by the user is prime. Inside the loop, when I find the number is not prime, I will change is prime to false and break out of the loop. The value of is prime will tell if the number is prime or not. Outside the loop, I will check its value. If it is true, I will display the number is prime. Else, I will display the number is not prime. The code compiles fine. Let's execute it and try out a few inputs. This approach too works correctly. So, I showed you two approaches to find out if the loop completed normally or exited early by executing break statement. You can use whichever you like more. For me, I usually prefer to use the second approach. I feel that it helps to keep the code cleaner and simpler. In the second approach, we are using the loop control variable only to control the loop. As it is not needed outside, so we declare it within the for loop. The use of Boolean variable is prime makes the code intuitive and easier to understand. These are my reasons for using the second approach. If you find them convincing, you too should use the second approach. In this lesson, we will look at the second jump statement, continue. Continue statement transfers the program control to the beginning of the loop to start the next iteration, skipping the remaining statements in the current iteration. Going through an example program will make its working clear, so let's switch to BlueJ. This is a very simple example program which prints the odd numbers between 1 and 5 using the continue statement. Let me execute this program and show you the output. As I told you, it prints the odd numbers 1, 3 and 5. Now let's go over the program to understand the working of continue statement. Demo continue method starts with a for loop. This loop iterates from 1 to 5, and after each iteration, its loop control variable I is incremented by 1. But still, we get the output as 1, 3, 5 and not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The reason is the continue statement. Inside the loop body, this if condition checks if I is divisible by 2. That is, if I is an even number. If it is, then the continue statement is executed. Continue statement transfers the program control back to the beginning of the for loop to start the next iteration. This print statement is skipped in the current iteration. As for all even numbers, we skip printing them by using continue statement, so only the odd numbers between 1 and 5 gets printed. Let me do the dry run of this program for a couple of iterations to make the working of continue statement absolutely clear. Program control comes to the for loop. I is initialized to 1. As the loop condition is true, program control enters the loop body. I is 1, so it is not divisible by 2. This if condition is false. Program control moves to the print statement. Value of I, which is 1, gets printed to the console. Program control goes back to the beginning of the for loop. Update part of the loop increments I to 2. Loop condition is still true, so second iteration of the loop starts. Program control enters the loop body. For this iteration, the if check is true as value of I is 2. Program control comes to the continue statement and executes it. Continue statement transfers the program control back to the beginning of the for loop. This print statement is skipped, so 2 is not printed to the console. The update part of for loop increments I to 3. As loop condition is true, third iteration starts. Similarly, the third, fourth and fifth iterations happen, printing 3 and 5 to the console. I hope with this you have developed some understanding of continue statement. This was just a very simple example to explain you continue statement. Of course, you can print odd numbers between 1 and 5 without using continue statement by simply incrementing I by 2 instead of 1 in each iteration like this. But the purpose here was to explain you the working of continue statement. In fact, good uses of continue statements are rare, as Java provides a rich set of loop statements which fit most applications. You can use continue statement with while and do while loops as well. Here is the continue example program written using while loop. Let's execute it. We get the same output. There is a slight difference between how continue works in while do while loops as compared to for loops. As you saw in the previous example, in case of for loops, when continue statement was executed, program control went to the beginning of the loop and first update part was executed, incrementing the loop control variable I. After that, the loop condition was tested. In case of while and do while loops, continue statement transfers the program control directly to the loop condition, as updating the loop control variable is not part of while and do while loop constructs. Similarly, you can use continue statement in do while loops as well. A loop with an empty body is called an empty loop. In Java, all the three loops can have an empty body. We write an empty loop like this. In place of the loop body, we have written these semicolons in the loops. A statement which just consists of a semicolon is called a null statement and is syntactically valid in Java. But what is the use of writing an empty loop without a body? Turns out there are some good use cases for empty loops. If the initialization, condition and update parts of your loop are enough to handle all the details by themselves, then you don't need a loop body. Let's switch to BlueJ and see such an example of empty loops. This program calculates the sum of numbers from 1 to 5 using an empty for loop. Let's execute it. We correctly got the output as 15. Coming to the program, in this line we declare an int variable sum and initialize it with 0. Next, we have a for loop. Notice that its body is this null statement which is just a semicolon, so this is an empty for loop. Let's take a closer look at what's happening in this loop. In the initialization part, we initialize I to 1. The loop iterates as long as I is less than or equal to 5. The summation process is handled in the update part. This sum plus equal to I++ might look scary at first glance, but don't worry, it is very simple. I will help you understand it through a dry run of this program. At the start of the loop, I is initialized to 1. Loop condition is true, first iteration starts. But as the loop body is empty, program control immediately comes to the update part. This sum plus equal to I++ can be written like this. I have just expanded the shorthand operator plus equal to. Now we must put the values of sum and I. Current value of sum is 0, so this becomes sum equals to 0 plus. Next, we need to put the value of I++. I++ being post increment operator, it follows the rule first use then increment. First, the current value of I, which is 1, is used in the expression, so this becomes sum equal to 0 plus 1. After that, I is incremented to 2. In a nutshell, sum plus equal to I++ adds the value of I to sum and after adding increments the value of I by 1. The condition is tested to see if next iteration of the loop can be started. As I is still less than 5, second iteration of the loop starts. Again, program control immediately comes to the update part as loop body is empty. This time, sum plus equal to I++ becomes this, as the current value of sum and I are 1 and 2 respectively. After that, the post increment operator I++ increments I to 3. Other iterations of this empty for loop proceed in a similar way till I is less than equal to 5. Once the loop completes iterating, sum of numbers from 1 to 5 is computed and stored in the variable sum. In the next line, we print this sum to the console. I hope this gives you clarity on the usage of empty loops. Next, we will look at another interesting application of empty loops, the delay loop. A delay loop is a special case of empty loops. Sometimes we need to add some delay between actions in our programs. Delay loops help us do that. It pauses the execution of the program for some finite amount of time. Here is how you can write a delay loop using for, while and do while. This 10 billion that I have specified here is just an example. You can put any value here depending on how much delay you want to introduce. The higher this value, the more delay it will create. There is nothing special in delay loops. Basically, what we are doing in a delay loop is that we are just giving some task to the CPU to keep it busy for some time so that it processes the next set of statements of our program after some delay. In these examples of delay loops, we are asking the CPU to count from 0 to 10 billion before processing the next statement. The time CPU will take to count from 0 to 10 billion will be seen as a delay in the execution of our program. So the basic purpose of a delay loop is to keep the CPU busy with some task to create a delay. If I ask the CPU to count from 0 to 10 billion, or 10 billion to 0, in both these cases, I will create the same amount of delay. So, I can write these delay loops like this also. Instead of going from 0 to 10 billion, the loops are now going from 10 billion to 0. For the purpose of delay loops, I am repeating it again. For the purpose of only delay loops, these two sets of loops are the same. Let's now switch to BlueJ and see one of these delay loops in action. This program will first print A to the console, then after some delay, it will print B to the console. Let's execute it. A is printed, now the delay loop is executing, and now B is printed after some delay. If I decrease this number, the delay will decrease. I am removing 10. Now this is 1 billion. Let's execute it. Notice that the delay was less this time. Similarly, if I increase it, the delay will increase. The code for while and do while version of this delay loop is provided in the notes of this chapter. That concludes our discussion of delay loops. Next, we will look at finite and infinite loops. A loop which iterates for a finite number of iterations is termed as a finite loop. All the loops we have seen so far are examples of finite loops. A loop which continues iterating indefinitely and never stops is termed as an infinite loop. We briefly looked at infinite loops using for statement in the for loop variations chapter. Now we will discuss infinite loops in depth. A loop becomes an infinite loop when its condition always evaluates to true. So, the simplest ways to create infinite loops using the three looping constructs of Java are like this. As we saw in the for loop variations chapter, if we don't specify a condition in for loop, Java assumes it to be always true. Let me quickly execute one of them and show you in BlueJ. As you can see, this loop iterates forever as its condition is always true. To stop it, I will restart the JVM using this button. By now, you might wonder that is there any practical use of an infinite loop? After all, it just continues running endlessly. In most practical use cases of infinite loops, break statement handles termination of the loop when the required condition is met. Let's see an example where such an infinite loop might be helpful. This program keeps on asking the user to enter a number and displays its sum of digits until the user enters a number whose sum of digits is equal to 9. Let me execute it and show you it's working. Then we will look at its code. It starts by asking for a number. I will give 52. It displays the sum of digits as 7, says loop will continue, and again asks to input a number. I will give 645 this time. It will continue like this. If I enter a number whose sum of digits is 9, like 72, the loop stops. Now that you are clear with what this program does, let's look at its code to understand how it does it. This is our infinite while loop, which continuously keeps asking the user to enter a number. Inside the loop, we calculate the sum of digits of the number and display it. If the sum is equal to 9, we tell the user that the loop will stop now and execute the break statement to end the loop. Otherwise, we tell the user that the loop will continue and it keeps on iterating. That's a relatively simpler application of an infinite loop where we terminate the loop based on some special termination condition. Most often, we end up creating an infinite loop in place of a finite loop because of very basic logical mistakes in our programs. In this lesson, I will show you a few of them. Whenever you are writing loops, be very careful that you don't make such mistakes and end up creating an infinite loop instead of a finite one. The most common mistake I have seen students make is forgetting to update the loop control variable when writing a while loop. In while and do while loops, updating the loop control variable is not part of the loop syntax. So it is very easy to forget it and create an infinite loop. Let me show you an example of this mistake in BlueJ. I want to print numbers from 1 to 10 using a while loop. I will first declare and initialize the loop control variable to 1. After that, I will write my while loop. Inside the loop, I will print I. I am thrilled and excited that I have finished my program so quickly. I can't wait to execute it. After executing, I come to know that my program is not giving me the expected output. Instead of printing the numbers from 1 to 10, it is printing 1 in an infinite loop. Let's stop the program by restarting the JVM and go back to the code. Notice that I forgot to increment I inside the while loop. Because of this, the while loop became an infinite loop as the value of I is always 1. So the loop's condition is always true. To fix it, I will increment I inside the loop like this. I will run it again. Now I get the correct output. The next common mistake that I want to discuss with you happens when you increment the loop control variable, but the loop condition required the loop control variable to be decremented. Let me show it to you with an example. This time, I want to write a program to print numbers backwards from 10 to 1. I will use a for loop for this. Now, happily, I will execute the program, only to find that my program is printing numbers in an infinite loop. Let's restart the JVM to stop the infinite loop and go back to the code. The reason for this infinite loop is that instead of decrementing I, we are incrementing it. Because of this, I is always greater than 1 and the loop condition is always true, resulting in an infinite loop. To get the correct output, we should decrement I like this. Now let me execute the program. This time I get the correct output. So when writing loops, be very careful about whether you need to increment or decrement the loop control variable. Now that I have told you about these possible mistakes, I am confident you will not lose marks because of them.